We are live. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Happy Saturday. I see that YouTube, Twitter, and Rumble are all on the ball, and apparently we're going to have Isidora's Tale making periodic cameo appearances. So, yay. That means Styx Hexenhammer is not the only person who gets the kitty content. This makes me very happy. So the reason why I'm here and why I put on makeup at this hour of a Saturday morning is because I wanted to share with you what I've come up with for an American pagan calendar, at least a possible one, a template that maybe we can just kind of use, discuss, and see if it is touching on points of commonality. So once I confirm that things are actually good to go on Rumble's side. Okay. Yeah, we are there. Very good, very good. Okay. So now without further ado, let's start getting into it. Now, I don't know how well you are able to see on your end of things with this. I don't know if the print is visible enough. I made it as big as I could, but in case you can't see it particularly well, I do have it uploaded onto Blackbird's Brew on Gilded. If you go to the category, the American Paganism and Witchcraft Project, and you click on that drop box, you will see a channel called American Celebrations, and that's where you will find the PDF version of this, just in case you want to follow along and in case in case it's not all that visible on your eyes. I apologize for that. In my defense, I did what I could. So let's get into it. The idea of this was to combine our common spiritual occasions, our cultural occasions, and our secular occasions, and kind of mash it together and infuse a bit of pagan spirituality into both the cultural and secular celebrations. The reason I did this is because historically, pagan societies didn't really put all of their occasions into this separate, unrelated, rigid boxes. And I think we have an opportunity in the here and now to really integrate these aspects of our lives. And my hope is that this would create a greater sense of spiritual and cultural identity, and that would result in hopefully personal stability, more stability within the family, and then if it spreads around, more stability within our society, because there'll be some common glue, particularly when it comes to highlighting the importance of cultural and secular celebrations. Those are things that we have in common even with non-pagans, and if they see us as people with whom they have in common, it really pushes back on the whole dehumanization that we've experienced, all the bad press, the propaganda, and also those idiots who wear our label, but my goodness, do they not really seem to live up to it. So that's my train of thought there. Also, I am making use of the Gregorian calendar. The reason for that is because that's what we commonly use. Our ancestors used the calendars and their reckonings of times that were customary for them. And of course, what the beginning and endings of their years were. I mean, that really varied depending upon their geographical locations, what was going on in their environment. I mean, you know the drill. But they did what made sense for them at the time. So I think for us, I think it does make sense for us to start making better use of the Gregorian calendar and just kind of infuse what we're trying to do into it. So next up, okay, we're still good there on Rumble. Excellent, excellent. So the next thing up is going by the date. And I know I don't always particularly like it either. And many of our pagan celebrations don't really have a fixed date. You have, this generalish time of year, this and such tends to take place. And I think there are really reasonable arguments that people can make for maybe going by full moons or visible seasonal changes. However, having more of a fixed date, it makes coordination amongst pagans who want to celebrate together a little bit easier. You can definitely plan in advance, and you can kind of budget out your time throughout the year. And because since most of our holy days do have more than just one meaning and more than just one theme, I think that does make it easier for us to adjust for variance in the climate. We might all be celebrating, say, the solstice that just passed. We all have that shared general idea that this is an important time of year and it's worth marking it in some way. But, our individual traditions, perhaps even our family traditions, if you're fortunate enough to have a more pagan-centric family, those things will be different, and we'll experience it differently depending upon how far north or south we live. But we can still have that unity. We're all doing the same thing, even if the details are different. So Factors that I've taken into consideration for this calendar are, the meaning. What is it that we are actually celebrating? Once you really get down to the bare bones of it, what themes are emphasized, what is their significance, and ultimately, do we know why we care about it? I put it that bluntly because I do think it is important that we need to be able to articulate, why does this matter? Why should we care? What on earth does it mean to us in the here and now? Because without that, I mean, you can have someone who follows things very ritualistically or in a legalistic way, but their heart won't really be in it, and they'll come across a spiritual roadblock, and instead of working through it, they'll say, "Oh, well, I just don't think any of this matters," and they'll go away. And that may not necessarily be the right move for them. That they might be, cutting off their nose to spite their face, and the reason why it happens, in part, for a lot of people, is because they never. Figured out about why do they care and why it might have personal meaning for them. So now the issues of names. Does the name for a particular celebration clearly indicate what the occasion is about? That is the first factor I consider. The next is the name in our common language? Or is the term as good as adopted into it? Or is this in a foreign tongue? Now, I'm not necessarily saying that we need to throw out all of the foreign names for our holidays, just out the window, but I am saying that if it is possible for us to express the idea in English, we probably should. Another thing, is the name pronounceable? And can people spell it? I am tired of tripping over my own tongue, trying to say words that are completely alien to me, that I get very conflicting reports about how they should be pronounced and the exact meaning and thereof. I want to get the gist of what the ancient terms was and then have something in English that we can all pronounce and easily understand. The other consideration, is the name cumbersome or overly long? Because if we're going to adopt terms that are more specific for Americans and that are tailored for the English language, we don't want to have something that is longer than what we replaced it with. That's something that the Marxists always do whenever they want to revamp or the language on something. It always seems to be longer and more unwieldy and irritating. We need to be able to keep things simple. And then the other thing about names is, does it have appeal and or significance to pagans of most stripes? Because I think the common holiday should be about things that bring people together, not things that divide them up into little groups and start really, really boring debates about things that don't ultimately matter. Okay, so let's see, checking on. Oh, and hello, Patty Potter Games. I see you. Thank you for being here. I appreciate you, sir. So glad to have you here. Okay, so see, I am keeping an eye on things. Let's see. Next thing up is that some holidays, as we know, have less than good origins. Sometimes they have come from traditions, or they have ideas that are very inconsistent with pagan values. So the question I ask is, has the celebration in question evolved and has it taken on a different meaning? And is the occasion widely embraced by our countrymen, and does it bring people together in friendship? And as we go on, you will see that there are certain holidays on the common calendar that I have absolutely embraced, and I'll get into why when we get to those. And there are others that I left off because it was all about division rather than bringing people together. And now we also have regional realities. The meaning of a seasonal celebration will be shaded by the land itself, and that'll be the land that we're on, not the land that we're thinking about, whether it's a continent away or whether it's an estate away. We should really be looking to tailor things for where we are. And is it both appropriate and necessary to observe the ebb and flows in your local environment and to tailor your celebrations accordingly? And I think that the precedent of this approach can be found in ancient pagan societies. That's why we see so many variations about, this village, we found they did that. But 50 miles away, they did something completely different. I mean, it was okay to do slightly different things. And I do think that the research is pretty consistent about that. So we have covered the basics, gang. Let us go into the beginning. First, beginning with New Year's Day, January 1st. And you'll see how I have, a meaning, a justification, deities, mythical beings, ancestors, land spirits, traditions, astrology, elements, colors, plants, animal, and crystals. You will see this for most of the celebrations we'll be talking about today. So the general meaning of New Year's Day, whether it's January 1st or whether we're thinking about, some other reckoning of time, is that it's just the beginning of a new cycle. It's a fresh start. It tends to be very hopeful. And of course, we know that pagan societies have always marked the beginning and endings of years, in accordance with what was customary for them at the time. And January 1st as the new year, that's been customary in modern society for quite a while. And I don't think that we lose anything by treating it accordingly. Now, for a deity we might choose to say hello to, I was thinking of Janus. He was a two-faced Roman god of beginnings and endings, thresholds, daybreak, and travel. For the mythical beings, I chose the Fates because, the fresh first day of a new year, Fates are up to something. There's all sorts of things that have yet to be revealed. For ancestors, I would think of people within the family line who, made massive changes that may have changed the course of your family's history or really changed the course of their own lives. And it's okay if we don't know of anyone specific. There's bound to be someone, especially for those of us who live in America. At some point, one of our ancestors said, you know what? I think I'd rather cross that ocean and face goodness knows what when I get there than stay where I'm at. So at some point, we had someone who did make a massive change that made quite a bit of difference to the fates of our families. And then for air spirits, I was thinking of air sylphs just because I was thinking of the winds of January, how cold it is, and just the idea about how we do tend to become very introverted at this time of year. We're thinking about what we want to accomplish. We're starting to plan. We're brainstorming, daydreaming, all those things. So anything to do with the element of air. So traditions for this, certainly recovery from New Year's Eve, especially if you were out and about. A lot of people do still make resolutions. And that's always my day for putting away Yule and Christmas decorations. It's also a good day for divination for the year ahead, maybe pulling a card per month. And it's also good for making offerings about divine guidance, because especially if we're planning to make significant changes in our lives, I really think we should, include the gods in on that calculation. Could you give me a nudge if I'm moving in a direction that's ultimately going to be good for me and mine? See, astrology, this New Year's Day occurs in the sign of Capricorn, which is a cardinal earth sign. Now, for the elements, I try to think about what the elements represent or what they're doing at any given point in the year. So for New Year's Day, air is the cutting winds. Fire, it should be that blazing fireplace. Water, it's definitely in the form of ice and snow. And the earth is sleeping at rest. If you're going to do any kind of decorations, I would think of whites, charcoal, silver, things that are very clean, very calm, very not very much in your face, clean slate type of colors. For plants, all evergreens, but also the elder tree and spearmint. For the animal, I chose the owl, and for the crystal, I chose cracked quartz. That is by far my favorite quartz. And all of the various cracks within a cracked quartz, it really that signifies to me all of the various pathways a person's life could take during the course of a year. So that's my justification for bringing it to New Year's Day. Now, before we go on to the next one, I'm checking on comments. Patty's still there. Yay. Okay, we are still good. All caught up there. So now for Martin Luther King Jr. Day, January 15th. The overall meaning of this day, certainly for me, is the famous I Have a Dream speech. And when I think of Martin Luther King Jr., I'm not thinking about really who he was as a person or the vast majority of his own political and social causes. I'm not really thinking about the man. I'm thinking about what that speech really represented, because it touched on a common thread in American culture. The idea that we're all created equal and that there's a need for us all to be equal under the law. That's something that's very much at our core. And judging people for merit or lack thereof, I think that is the mark of an honorable person. And I think honor is key to pagan values, as was touched upon in yesterday's live stream. So traditions for this day. And originally, it was a federal holiday intended to be a day of service for meritocratic societies. And that's really fallen away. Usually with Martin Luther King Jr. Day, we see a lot of virtue signaling that gets very obnoxious. And then we see sales. And I think we could do a little bit better. I think we could use the day to make a conscious effort to act more in accordance with honorable principles that improves our own characters and, by extension, benefits our communities. In astrology, this day takes place in the sign of Capricorn, cardinal Earth. The elements for air, I chose ideas, with fire, passion, water, empathy, and earth, practicality. Colors of red, white, and blue. You'll see this for most of the federal holidays. Plants, I chose oak, carnation, and pepper. The animal of the lion, and the crystal of diamond. Okay, so now for Imbolc, or Charming of the Plow, or Groundhog Day, or as I would like to suggest, possibly referring to it as First Life. This takes place on February 2nd. The general meaning of these occasions is purification, noticing the lengthening days, that first whisper, or at least that first dream of spring. And this is the first of the traditional spring festivals. It's an opportunity for spiritual and mundane cleansing and to prepare for the coming season ahead. For this, I chose the goddess Bridget. She's of the Celtic pantheon. She's known for being the goddess of the three sacred flames of healing, smithing, and poetry, and also for being the keeper of the holy wells. For this, I chose the mythical being of the dragon, because by that time of year, I would very much like any extra heat at all from whatever source. And for ancestors, we could look to people who were artists or tradesmen, medical professionals, clergy, or farmers. And for the land spirits, I was thinking of fire fae. Anything starting to get that earth loosening and softening and coming back to life. Now, traditionally, this has been a time of purification rituals, early spring cleaning, divination, especially regarding the weather and when exactly will spring be arriving. That did not start with Groundhog's Day. That's just a modern permutation of it. But this is also a time to bless farming equipment, gardening tools. You can indulge in baking and cooking magic, candle magic, meditations, very creative pursuits, and planning for the growing year, building on that progress you made in January. Astrologically, this takes place in the sign of Aquarius, which is fixed air. And the elements for air, I'm thinking chilly winds, fire in the sense of candles and bonfires, water, hopefully we're seeing the melting snow and ice, or at least we are starting to dream of that happening. My apologies for people who live further north than I am, because I know you have to wait many a month before you can even hope for that process to start. But for the earth element, it is starting to soften. It is starting to warm. And for colors, I'm thinking white, the very palest of pastels, and the slight glimmer of gold representing those rays of sunlight starting to creep back into our world. And for plants, cedar, grain, basil, our animals, sheep, the groundhog, because we can't do without him at this point. He is a staple of American culture, but also the robin and the crystal of amethyst. Now, real quick. Okay. I knew there'd be comments. On Rumble, I've got Patty Pollard Game saying Imbolc definitely feels like what New Year's Day should have been. For sure. I mean, and if sometime in the future, the New Year was, shifted to that point, I'm not going to argue. But at this point, they are kind of separate. Then he went on to say, a good time to oil your mower, sharpen your shears and such. Oh, absolutely. Whenever when it does come time to get back into the garden and doing all the things, it's nice to know that you're not having to do your preparation when you need to actually go out and do the work. And let's see if we got anything. Okay, we are caught up on the comments. So now let us move to the next occasion of Valentine's Day, February 14th. I realize not everyone's a fan, and people have long since accused this of being a Hallmark holiday. Well, and to that I say it's only a Hallmark holiday if that's what you make it. So the meaning of it is a celebration of romance, relationships, and marriage. And I think it's justified for us to celebrate because it's important to treat your partner in a loving and supportive and respectful way. And of course, this should be an everyday occurrence. But when we take a moment to set aside specific occasions and use those occasions as an excuse to make extra effort, not, treating your spouse bad the rest of the time, but just making extra effort to be good to them and reinvigorating the romance. I think it reminds your partner of just a special status they have in your life. And they, of course, are more likely to reciprocate it. And it can be good to have these little touchstones throughout the year to just reset the relationship, because let's face it, all relationships have their ups and downs, and it's a good idea just to every so often remind them of how much they do matter. For the deity, I chose Aphrodite, Greek goddess of love, beauty, and pleasure, the mythical being of salamanders and undines. These are both fire and water spirits, and romance and Valentine's Day. That does strike me as very much a fire and water kind of occasion. Ancestors, matchmakers. You're bound to have some kind of matchmaker back in your family line somewhere. And for the land spirits, floral nature spirits, because of course this is a flower holiday. Traditions include romantic dinners, gifts of candy and flowers, sending valentines, reading poetry, listening to romantic instrumental music, watching romantic films, getaway traveling. And of course, if you're unpartnered, this is a good time for love attracting spell work and ritual, and also honoring deities associated with romantic love. In astrology, this takes place when the sun is in Aquarius, fixed air sign. And for the elements, think of air in the sense of whispered sweet nothings, and the fire as passion, and water as attachment, and earth as binding. Because if things are going well, those are essentially what you want the elements to be doing in your relationship. Colors, I chose red, pink, white, silver, and black. And that's just because that's what I ordinarily see. For plants, roses, carnations, and ivy. Animals, lovebirds, and crystal, the rose quartz. Our next holiday on the calendar is Washington's birthday, usually called President's Day, which takes place February 19th. Oh, and some of these dates where it happens to be, this particular Monday or this particular Thursday, all of these dates are specific to 2024. Should have said that before, but I forgot. But mentioned it now. The meaning of this day, at least what I think it ought to be, is the American tradition of leadership in its ideal way. And I do think that we do have to look to the ideal of what the presidency represents. It is supposed to be the face of American governance and culture to the country and to the world, and a symbol of non-tyrannical authority and civic service. Obviously, we have major issues with that, and we have for many generations. But if we want to look to the ideal, that's really what it ought to be. It could be a reminder of what the standard should be and how we need to raise our standards in that regard. For the deity, I chose Odin because he is the All-Father, the head of the Norse pantheon. He's a god of wisdom and poetry, but he is also the king of Asgard. And because one of his dominant qualities is that seeking and questing for wisdom and knowledge, I think that is something that anyone who's in a position of leadership really needs to cultivate. For mythical beings, I chose the Norns because the Norns were the weavers and shapers of fate. And of course, people who are in positions of responsibility in the political realm, they are most definitely shaping the fate. And that's something that I think voters ought to take much more seriously. For ancestors, I was thinking of family members that were known to have pronounced leadership ability. Land spirits, I was thinking all air spirits because of the intellectual aspect of leadership. Now for traditions, this is another holiday that in practice, it's just evolved into a shopping day. We've got sales, yay! And this is understandable because, as I've said, many presidents fall far short of the ideal in terms of their character, conduct, and policies. However, we can we could also on this day make offerings to gods and goddesses of wisdom, those associated with leadership and sovereignty, and appeal to them to wield their influence over our dubious politicians and over us, so we can perhaps choose more wisely when the choosing time comes around again. Astrologically, this occurs at the very beginning of Pisces, which is a mutable water sign. For the elements, air in the sense of philosophy, fire, the warrior spirit, water, the ability to make connections, and earth, accomplishment, because these are the manifestations of these elements that I would like to see with people who are in positions of power. Colors, again, I chose red, white, and blue. Plants, oak, ash, and thorn. The animal of the eagle, because it is our national symbol. And the crystals, ruby, diamond, and sapphire. Now let me check to see if we've got any comments. And I see that Ro has joined us. Welcome, Ro. Glad you were able to catch it. Oh, so glad to have you here. I am going to be, going back and forth between all of my various screens to make sure I don't miss any comments. I'm so happy you're here. All righty. So next on our docket, this is a fairly controversial one, depending on who you're asking. It is St. Patrick's Day, March 17th. There are there are definitely ways to look at this, even within the Blackbird Brew group on Gilded. There's one member who has just an absolute loathing for this occasion, and there's another member for whom this is their favorite holiday. So clearly, we've got some differences in interpretation here. Now, traditionally, St. Patrick's Day, and by traditionally, I'm talking hundreds of years ago, traditionally, it is a feast honoring the legacy of St. Patrick. And of course, St. Patrick did not do pagans any favors and treated us to some rather nasty brutality. And so the idea of celebrating his memory would be legitimately offensive. But if we look at modernity, the only thing really remaining of St. Patrick's legacy for the day is just the name. It's turned into this exuberant celebration of Irish culture and folklore. And there are quite a number of Americans who have at least some measure of Irish ancestry. Um, so as the only thing that really remains of St. Patrick is the name, and it's just turned into this day of parades and, eating corned beef and cabbage, drinking green ale, telling stories about leprechauns, looking for pots of gold at the end of the rainbow, and really lively Celtic music. I think there is an argument to be made that what it was originally and what it is today have practically nothing in common. So for the deity, I chose the Dagda, who is the head of the Celtic pantheon known as the good god, a mythical being leprechaun, because what else could I choose on this occasion? Ancestors, all of our ancestors of Irish extraction, but also musicians, artists, and chefs, because that's really what the holidays turned into. And land spirits, I was thinking of gnomes and elemental earth spirits. Now, traditions of St. Patrick's Day, including either participating or attending a parade, wearing green, because in America it really is customary for anyone celebrating the day to wear green, no matter what their religious persuasion is. I know in Ireland, it's green for Catholic and it's orange for Protestants, but we're in America and it's a day of green. It's also traditional to cook Irish dishes, to get a nice Guinness or ale, to read and tell stories from Celtic lore. We could even dance a jig to Irish folk music. Don't worry, no one has to watch if you don't want them to. We could do something artistic. We, look for the rainbows, set leprechaun traps. I've seen some really fun projects on Pinterest meant for kids for this. So that just seems like fun. Makes me wish I was still 5. But it's also a good day to honor Celtic deities, because even if you can't shake the idea of who St. Patrick was, certainly the fact that his celebration has gone so far from what he would have wanted it to be, that does really strike me as being a victory of the Celtic gods over him. And of course, I had to include my husband and I's personal tradition, on which this day we watch the Boondock Saints movies. We love them. It's fun. Astrology. This occurs in the sign of Pisces, mutable water. For the elements of air, I'm thinking very brisk. There's nothing quite so cutting as March air. Fire is more so in the sense of giving energy. Water, like a mist. Earth, new shoots of plants. And for colors, I was thinking green, the rainbow, because of the legends with leprechauns and rainbows and pots of gold, but also of gold for the same reason. Plant the shamrock, because of course. And for the animal, I chose cats because they have a very similar attitude to leprechauns, at least in my opinion. And the crystal I chose is green jasper. All right, let me see if anyone's had something to say. American Folklore and Pagan. Hello to you, sir. Glad to have you here. Yeah, Irish Celtic Day. And gnomes do rock. I love a good gnome. So glad to have you here. Okay, caught up on comments. So our next one is Astara, also commonly called the spring equinox. Next year it will be taking place on March 19th. The meaning of this is that it is a herald of spring. It's a time of equal day and night, and it is the renewal of life. For many ancient pagan cultures, the spring equinox, it did mark the renewal of the year and the beginning of the agricultural season. But this is also the shift into having more daylight hours than nighttime hours, especially after the dark of winter. That's really when you turn that corner. I mean, we notice it a little bit in a mulk, which is why I was saying maybe we could call it first light. Let me know what you think in the comments. But by the time the equinoxes come around, that's when it becomes very evident to us. For the deity, I chose the Germanic goddess Astara. She was a goddess of spring and youth. It's possibly also another name for the Norse goddess Vidun. I've seen that theory bandied about. So if that's something you're interested in, I mean, definitely look it up and see what you think. Mythical being, I chose pixies because that was fun. For ancestors, I was thinking our ancestors who we knew to be enthusiastic gardeners, farmers, and also anyone in our family line who was known to be highly optimistic. For land spirits, I chose animal totems, particularly ones that are coming into their fertile cycle. Traditionally, it's a time for painting eggs, planting very hardy seeds, full on spring cleaning, honoring any deity associated with the spring, feasting on fresh spring greens, blending herbal teas for renewal, tending to newborn animals if you have them, burying an egg to bless the growing season, and a ritual to cast off the vestiges of winter. There's a lot of things that are done at this time of year, and I've just scratched the surface. Astrologically, this is the transition between the sun being in Pisces and Aries. It's that movement from mutable water to cardinal fire. In the elements, air is the winds of change, fire is renewal, water is nourishment, and the earth is awakened fertility. I chose all pastels for the colors, the plants of birch, daffodil, and gorse, just because those are what I tend to notice coming into their own during this time of year. But again, that's specific to where I live. Where you live, you could be experiencing something entirely differently. So again, this is just a possible template. Something for us to just kind of work off of and go our own direction with. For the animals, I chose the robin, the rabbit, and the snake, and the crystal of aquamarine. Now we're going into another controversial celebration, that of Easter. You'll notice I put a question mark on it. Next year, it'll be held on March 31st. Now, for Christians, obviously, this is a celebration of the resurrection of Christ and their promise of salvation. But culturally, what I've noticed, it's turned into a fun chance for children to go Easter egg hunting, eat yummy chocolate, and wear colorful dresses. So, for our justification or objection to this, Easter is an overtly Christian occasion, and certainly I think it is the hardest to adapt to having just a common cultural meaning. But it also can't be denied that there are many Americans who have non-religious families who do get together to enjoy each other's company and all of the fun of non-religious traditions of Easter. The first Easter I ever celebrated, that was very much the case. And the second one, they weren't talking about Jesus or the resurrection. They didn't go to church. None of them ever went to church. Nobody cared. But they always kept together at Easter. They baked a ham. They had fresh spring greens and all the things. I do think that it's starting to move in the direction of just being something we do culturally. For the deity, I chose Flora, who is a Roman goddess of fruitfulness and flowers, the mythical being the Easter bunny. It's obviously a very modern one, but it's one that's very relevant for our culture. For our ancestors, I would say relatives who were known to have large families to celebrate fertility and the continuation of the line. This could also be a chance to honor deceased Christian relatives. As Easter would have meant a great deal to them. So even though it doesn't have the same spiritual meaning for us, not by any means, it did mean something to them, and showing them that little tip of the hat, that might be a graceful thing to do. Land spirits, I chose floral fae because by then we're starting to see some freaking flowers, and boy, what a relief that is after the winter. For as far as traditions, it's those big family dinners, leg of ham, or leg of lamb rather, or ham, spring vegetables, baked goods, Easter egg hunts, giving and receiving of Easter baskets, planting non-tender flowers. And honestly, I think this also seems like a really good day to visit with elderly family members. I don't know why it popped into my head exactly, but once it was there, it stuck. And so I'm mentioning it here. Astrologically, it occurs in the sign of Aries, which is cardinal fire. And for the element of air, I'm thinking soft breezes, the fire of warming days, the cleansing waters, and a rejuvenated earth element. Again, colors of pastels, plant Easter lilies, animals, chicks and rabbits, and the crystal of citrine. Now let me take a moment and see where things are. Let's see, Patty Potter Games was saying a good day to add or maintain the gnomes that guard your garden. Hell yes, absolutely. Sounds good to me. Let's see. Okay, caught up on the comments. See, I'm making an effort to keep an eye on what's going on, gang. So now we have April Fool's Day, which occurs on April 1st. The meaning of which is that it's this playful day of jokes, practical or otherwise, and it's a chance to relax into a bit of levity. We've had such serious times over the past several years, and there's been such an assault against comedy and people just being able to enjoy themselves. Mockery and telling jokes, comedy, it's a way to confront that trend of taking everything so seriously. Oh, pardon me. Ah. Okay, let's try that sentence again. But also, the great thing about comedy is it has a way of expending the energy of overwhelming emotions and moderating a disproportionate emotional reactions. So we could probably use that. For the deity, I chose Loki, or any deity who is known for their sense of humor or who carries the title of trickster. Loki has an outstanding sense of humor. And so this has been one of the days where I do a little something extra for him for sure. Mythical beings, the Fae, because they are known to be playful and tricky. Ancestors, any known pranksters in your family, and land spirits. I was thinking of plants and animals and spirits attached to them that are known for their ability to fool the eye or undergo a kind of metamorphosis, something that you think you know what I am, but I'm actually this sort of thing. And of course, we have the tradition of playing jokes, and I think this should be done in the spirit of good fun, not out of a desire to humiliate or embarrass anyone. But it's a you could watch comedies or attend a stand-up comic show, playfully tease people, just relax, have a good time, and just make sure you get a giggle that day. For astrology, the sun is still in Aries, cardinal fire. The air, I was thinking a strong breeze, fire, brighter days, water, the April showers. And of course, the earth by this time is definitely fertile. And as for colors, I think could have any, but I would think that Harlequin patterns would be a nice touch because it references the archetype of the court gesture and of clowns. Plants, I was thinking variegated flowers, animal the fox, and crystal snowflake obsidian. So there we go. Now for Beltane or May Day on May 1st. Now, I have to say, I don't particularly care for referring to this day as May Day, even though it is a nice, straightforward English name, and I have been advocating for that. The reason I don't is because of those nasty Marxists. They used May Day as, a day of the revolution. So I feel concerned that if people hear us refer to it as May Day, that'll kind of reinforce the misapprehension that paganism is just a form of leftism, which it is not. So I get to thinking, is Beltane a good enough common name for this, or is there another name we could be thinking of? I didn't really come up with one as I was preparing this. So if you have ideas, let me know in the comment section or in the chat. So the general meaning of this is the divine marriage. The planting and the breeding season is well underway, and this is reflected on the divine level as well, with unions between gods and goddesses, symbolically taking place or being renewed. It's a time of coming together. For the deities, I chose the archetypes of the May Queen and the Green Man, mythical beings of fairies, because this is one of the traditional times in which fairies are supposed to be active, at least in legend. For ancestors, a chance this would be a chance to honor all the married couples in your family tree, and the land spirits, anything that has to do with flowers and the maintenance of them and strengthening of them. Traditions include dancing around the maypole, wearing floral crowns, rituals symbolizing the divine marriage, feasts of spring produce and fruits, bonfires, really boisterous folk music, leaving offerings for the Fae, because again, in legend, it is the Seelie court that is gaining supremacy over the unseelie court at this particular time of year. And of course, I didn't mention it here because I forgot, but also, the tradition of making up a May basket, beautiful basket full of flowers. We could definitely bring that back. Astrologically, this takes place in mid-Taurus, a fixed earth sign. The elements of air are that soft breeze. The fire is the fire of bonfires. Water is refreshing rains. And the earth, it's in this state of bursting forth with flowers. It's beginning to manifest its fecundity. Colors, I would say all colors are suitable, brighter than pastels, something that has a little bit more punch and personality. And for plants, I chose the hawthorn, the lilac, and mushrooms, especially if they're in that nice fairy ring circle, the animal of the bee, and the crystal of bloodstones. So before we go on, let me see what else. Okay, still caught up on the comments. Take a little sip of water. Okay, so let's talk about Cinco de Mayo, May 5th. Traditionally, this is a celebration of Mexico gaining independence from France. But in America, it's a fun evening of good food, good tequila, and lively music. Naturally, Mexico throwing off the yoke of France really has absolutely nothing to do with us as Americans. It does not. But it is a tradition that has been brought to us by Mexicans who have naturalized as U.S. citizens. And Americans, if it involves food, drink, and music, if it's fun, we will probably embrace it, at least on a cultural level. And that seems to be what's taken place. Deity, I chose Dionysus. He just seemed the most appropriate fit for this sort of thing. Mythical beings of nymphs. Ancestors, if you have anyone of a Mexican origin on your family tree, for sure this would be a good day to honor them. But also anyone in your family who is known to be an entertainer, because this is all about entertainment and having a good time. Land spirits, I chose animal totems again. Traditions do include having dinner at a good Mexican restaurant or cooking at home with friends and family. Astrologically, this occurs in the sign of Taurus, which is a fixed earth sign. The elements, air in the sense of song, fire of cooking, water of joy, and earth of breaking bread together. I would suggest bright colors if you're doing anything decorative with it. Plant of cacti, animal coyote, crystal jasper, and that has to do with just the origin of where this came, and that has gradually been adopted into our culture. Next, we have Mother's Day, which in 2024 will take place on May 12th. It is a celebration of motherhood. And I think it's justified for us to especially give attention to this, just because giving birth to children is a sacred act. This is the way in which the family is perpetuated into the future. And the mother is giving of herself in the most literal possible way to ensure that that future is coming into being, it's nurtured, and so that the children ultimately thrive and can take their place as adults down the road. I chose the goddess Frigga, who is the Norse goddess of marriage and family. She is the all-mother and queen of Asgard. For the mythical being, I chose the Disir. In Norse spirituality, they are the female ancestors who guide the family from beyond the veil. For honoring our ancestors, all the mothers are mother-like figures. And for land spirits, I was thinking earth and water elementals, because their energy is receptive and feminine energy is receptive. Traditions include, making breakfast for mom, serving it to her while she's still in bed, cards, chocolates, flowers, taking over maybe her duties for the day, letting her have a rest. And of course, this is a time when it would be most appropriate to honor all mother goddesses. Astrologically, the sun is in Taurus, fixed earth. The elements of air in the sense of hope, fire of dedication, water of love, and earth of nurturing. And the colors, if you're going to do anything, kind of special, I would say use your mom's favorite colors, preferably. The day should be about her, after all. Plants, I would say seasonal florals or the mom's favorite. Animals, any species that's currently raising young, or again, mom's favorite. And I chose the crystal of rose quartz. It just seems to fit that feel of the day. Let's see, now for Memorial Day, May 27th, and again in 2024. This is the day where we honor fallen soldiers for their sacrifice. There is no pagan society that ever existed that did not show respect for the warriors who defended them, particularly for those who actually did die in battle. Modern celebrations are perfectly consistent with inherited pagan values and customs. This is a very easy fit for us. The deity I chose was Tyr, as he was a Norse god of war, law, and also of well-ordered community. Mythical beings, the Valkyries, because the Valkyries did cart off fallen warriors to the appropriate halls in the afterlife. Our ancestors, warriors, soldiers of all stripes. Land spirits, anything that is perceived to be the guardian of a cemetery. Traditions include laying wreaths and other floral arrangements at the graves of service members, attending ceremonies at war monuments, contributing to charities that benefit surviving family members of fallen soldiers. It's also tradition to hold barbecues with family and friends, because after the somberness of the occasion, I think we do need to preserve that lift. I think that's an important thing, because what do people give their lives for except to ensure that our way of life continue to be possible? So it can be done respectfully. And of course, as pagans, we could also bring our own personal spin on spirituality and ritual to either graveside dedications, or just bringing in kind of that right spirit, having the barbecue a chance to remember people, especially if someone has been lost fairly recently. Astrologically, I was thinking it occurs in Gemini, a mutable air sign. The elements of air, I was thinking clarity, fire, courage, water, devotion, and earth, rest. colors of red, white, and blue for obvious reasons. The plant of rosemary for remembrance. I chose the dogs for the animal because of their faithfulness and their loyalty. And I chose the crystal of hematite because this can be a pretty emotional day for people. Let's see again. All right, I'm seeing some comments referencing Beltane. American folklore uh, was saying that he thinks Beltane is easy to say. He thinks it's a good name. Yeah, I do too. I can't really think of anything particularly better for it. Let's see. And Ro has paid a very nice compliment. She's loving everything so far. Thank you. I appreciate it. It makes it a lot easier to do these things when I've got a little bit of cheerleaders in the comment section. It makes it really worthwhile, I can tell you. All right, so next on our docket, we have Father's Day of June 16th, next year, of course. It's all about honoring fatherhood, as we jolly well should, because they are the progenitors of our families, and they devote themselves to providing and protecting us. This work requires just the whole of their being, and I think that is well worthy of respect, all the more so because our culture is just determined to tear men down. So anything that we do to push against that, I think that helps us, in our own lives, and certainly our own fathers, and of course, but I think that also it adds something into the ether within our culture. The more people are saying, no, I'm rejecting the nastiness directed at men and fathers, and I'm embracing what they actually are. I think that that does help tip the balance. For the deity, I chose Odin, All-Father, chief of the Norse gods, the mythical being, the Haminja, a Norse family spirit that looks after the family and is actually kind of passed down through the generations. Ancestors, I would say all fathers of your family and father figures. And land spirits, I was thinking of hunting spirits, and I chose hunting spirits just because of the nature of what men do. Let's see, traditions, of course, showering father with gifts, pampering him. This is a little bit difficult to do. I've known many men who they're difficult to buy for. They don't always want pampering, and, just do what he lets you do. And of course, through ritual, we can honor fatherhood in general, various fathers who are within the pantheons. We can do it. Astrologically, the sun is in Gemini, mutable air. Elements, I was thinking air of strategy, of fire of drive, the waters of instinct, and earth of action, because again, I'm thinking about the core components that really motivate men. What are their base impulses? And that's very much what I see. The colors you might use are, of course, Dad's favorite. The plant, I did choose the oak because of its inherent strength, and I think that's very reflective of men. The animal of the wolf, because in the protective sense, many a man, he can go from, this sweet, kind man who you would never imagine, was capable of hurting a fly. But when the family's threatened, suddenly he does turn into that wolf, and he's baring his teeth quick as you can blink. And honestly, men are rather attractive when they're in that state. Let's just be honest. And for the crystal, I chose smoky quartz. Let's see. So now we come to a big issue, the issue of Juneteenth. It became a federal holiday just in 2021. It marks the occasion of June 19th, 1865, when Major General Gordon Granger issued a decree freeing the slaves in Texas. Now, the end of slavery is a very good thing. It was an abomination that it ever existed anywhere to begin with, let alone in the United States of America. So I don't have an objection to the premise of that day. But the issue really lies in the ideological convictions of the people who advocated for its creation and who make the biggest fuss over it. The loudest public voices that do make that big deal about Juneteenth, they are invariably Marxists, and they never miss an opportunity to harp on slavery that ended more than a century ago, and they refuse to acknowledge that anything in this country has changed for the better. Nothing at all. That, the world of 1865 and the world of 2023, nothing significant has happened. And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, how much of a grifter do you have to be to actively promote that? And of course, while they're pushing Juneteenth, they're wrapping themselves up in virtue, and they've persuaded people who aren't really aware of the political machinations that the day is just about celebrating freedom. So there are people who have embraced this quite innocently, just because they're not aware of the kind of people who are trying to make this a thing and their motivations for doing so. And what really ticked me off is that when I looked at federalholidays.net, just to make sure I wasn't missing any of the federal holidays for this presentation, they actually had the temerity to call the day Juneteenth National Independence Day. National Independence Day. I'm sorry, freeing the slaves is not the same thing as achieving political independence, and the freed slaves did not form a new and independent nation. So I'm a little confused about why we're calling it National Independence Day, because we do have an Independence Day, and that's July 4th, and it's for the whole country. Everybody, absolutely everybody. And creating a so-called Independence Day for a racial group, and for that racial group alone, that falls right in line with all the push to have a separate national anthem, separate national everything, and to just segregate Americans with a hyper racial focus instead of just letting people get along with who they get along with. And that's really what rubs me the wrong way. The occasion, which it could have been about the country taking a step forward, something that is, look how far we've come, look how things have changed. It's been reduced to being used as Marxist as an excuse to create needless division. And for that reason, Juneteenth gets nothing from me. Let's see. So next up, we will have Letha Midsummer Summer Solstice. But before I do that, I wanted to see what's going on in the comments. In reference to Memorial Day, Rofane was saying that she thinks it's a good addition to Memorial Day would be red poppies under the plant section. Yeah, I got no objection to that whatsoever. And again, this is just a template. This is just, this is the bare bones of an idea that I'm starting with. Absolutely additions and what have you. Absolutely in favor of that. And then she writes, woohoo, glad Juneteenth gets booed. Well, yeah, I feel like I have to. I mean, if it endures and if it gradually takes on a better meaning, the way that I've argued in favor of things like St. Patrick's Day and even Easter, then maybe, 100, 200 years from now, there could be a legitimate argument in saying, well, okay, the dumbasses did it for this reason, but the dumbasses aren't in charge anymore, and we've taken it in this direction. That could be possible, but we're not living in that world, and again, it gets under my skin. All the wrong people wanted it to be a thing. So yeah, that's where we are. So back to Letha, Midsummer, and Summer Solstice. This is another difficult thing when it comes to names, just because Letha is a name that many people outside of Wiccan circles just don't use and don't really get. Midsummer, if we call it Midsummer, even though that's perfectly accurate, and it is certainly it isn't unwieldy. We all understand what it is. We're going to continuously and perpetually come across these people say, well, actually, the summer solstice marks the first day of summer, so how could it be midsummer? Why don't people learn about these things? And I'm at an age where I'm thinking, how many annoying conversations do I actually want to endure? And, is arguing that, yes, midsummer is perfectly fine of a term, and these are the reasons why, is that really the best use of my time? So summer solstice, I mean, I think that's a fine name that we could use, but there's something, it does seem a little cumbersome. Summer solstice, I mean, it's practically a sentence in and of itself. So I don't know. If you have ideas, let me know. But of course, the meaning of this occasion is celebrating the height of the sun's power. And the summer solstice celebrations, they have a very long history all over the world, and it's always been a staple of modern pagan practice. The deity I chose was Apollo, Greek god of the sun, a mythical being, fire fae, obvious reasons. And ancestors, I thought, relatives who were born under the fire signs or who were in agricultural professions, because this is also an important part of the agricultural year. And land spirits, I was thinking of earth elementals, because the earth, of course, is very busy at its business right now. Traditions include rising with the dawn and greeting the first rays of light, bonfires, seeking out the fae at twilight, seeing if you can catch a glimpse, staying up until the sun finally goes down, having cookouts, picking St. John's wort, having rituals to honor solar deities, brewing magical sun teas, and making sun catchers. Tons of fun stuff we can do. Astrologically, this marks the transition from Gemini to Cancer, mutable air, into cardinal water. And for the elements, for air, I was thinking stillness. And this this is generally what's happening in my neck of the woods, just because by the time the heat of the year really sets in, the air is notoriously still. And so that's why I tend to think of the air being still. But if that's not the reality of where you're at, obviously you'll have different associations. Fire, power, water, cooling, and earth, productive. I was thinking for colors of yellows, bright oranges, not autumn oranges, but really bright oranges, hot pinks, rosy reds, and whites. The plants oak and holly, because of, oak king and the holly king, having their ritual tumble at this time of year. But I was also thinking of chamomile. Animal, goldfish. This is pretty much because of its color. And crystal of the tiger's eye. I thought those would be good additions. And now we have Independence Day, July 4th. The meaning, of course, is independence, as you would imagine. This celebrates our breaking away from the British Crown, forming a new nation. It was an absolutely pivotal moment in history, and it has created a new chapter in Western civilization. And the deity I chose was Libertas. She was the Roman embodiment of the state. Mythical being I chose were sprites because, again, we have very playful fae active at this time of the year. Ancestors, I was thinking of any family members we have who might have fought in the revolution or who have served in the cause of freedom since that time. So, again, this is another opportunity to honor people who have served in the military. And I was thinking, as far as land spirits went, I was thinking all of them, because all of them are relevant to this land. All of them are comprising this nation in a very real way. Traditions include fireworks, readings of the Declaration of Independence, block parties, patriotic music, lots of grilling. In America, we do like our excuses to grill and to barbecue. Astrologically, the sun is in Cancer, a cardinal water sign. For the elements, air in the sense of ideas, fire with drive, water, commitment, and earth with accomplishment. The obvious colors of red, white, and blue. Plants, I was thinking of red snapdragons, white geraniums, and bluebells. Animal is the eagle, and crystals of ruby, diamond, and sapphire. So let me check on comments. Alrighty. Think we are still caught up there. Alrighty then. So on to Lunasa Freyasson, first harvest, or as I am proposing, first shadow. This occurs on August 1st. The meaning of this is the first noticeable fading of light in the evening, whispers of the harvest to come, and gathering of the first fruits. The beginnings of the harvest set in motion preparation for the winter. The strength of the sun is beginning to lose its grip. I mean, we're not out of the woods with the hot weather, but the sun is starting to wane a little bit. And this is also about starting to receive the just rewards for our hard work. And that's just a common human need, whether we are thinking of our non-agricultural professions or what we're getting out of the garden, or even progress that we've made spiritually throughout the year. If we have kept at it, usually by this time we're starting to see some results. The deity I chose was Lu, who is a Celtic solar god, also a god of sorcery, history, poetry, and all the trades. I chose the mythical being of brownies because those household spirits involved in the preparation, I think they really do start coming to the fore. As far as ancestors, I was thinking tradesmen, farmers, and scholars, because those all reflect the many skills of Lu. Land spirits, I would say any spirit that has to do with farming or with protecting agricultural fields. Traditions include baking bread and brewing beer, making corn dollies, gathering in the first fruits, harvest fairs and festivals, and of course games of all sorts. Astrologically, the sun is in Leo, which is a fixed fire sign. With the elements, I'm thinking air with really hot gusts of wind, fire, blazing temperatures, water, humidity, especially if you live in Missouri. We have plenty of that in August. And of course, the earth, it is fruitful. We're beginning to get the results from it. Colors, I was thinking kind of golden wheat colors, ripe berry shades, and sage greens. I mean, at least that's what I decorate with. I mean, you do you by all means, but those are the colors that I see as being a bit more dominant in the area where I live, which is why I think of them. Plants, blackberries, grains, rowan trees. Animals, chickens, cattle, pigs, crystals, citrine, peridot, and jasper. Next, we have Labor Day. Next year, it will be held on September 2nd. And it is about honoring productive work, all forms of manual labor. It's also a day of rest. Now, this is another one of those where we have a justification and an objection, because Labor Day outright has Marxist origins, and that is absolutely beyond dispute. However, that being admitted, it has to be said that in the United States, Labor Day has taken on the cultural associations of being kind of that official end of the summer season. It's our really last long weekend for people to kind of get away, go off to the lake, do that stuff. It's an opportunity to relax, to grill, again with the grilling. Also, working hard, getting the rewards for that work, that is perfectly consistent with pagan values. So while this holiday has a really murky beginning, I think that enough time has passed and there's been enough development that it's been removed from those nasty origins and it has been properly Americanized. For the deity, I chose Thor, Norse god of storms, protector of Midgard, and patron of productive work. The mythical being of the dwarves, ancestors, old tradesmen, land spirits, brownies. And traditions, of course, include going to the lake, having fun with water sports, grilling, drinking, getting away from everyone and everything in normal daily life, and just taking a break. Astrologically, this occurs in Virgo, which is a mutable earth sign. The element of air is refreshing, at least it's starting to be. Fire, I was thinking of campfires, water, lakes, and earth, just a sense of rest. Colors, I chose red, white, and blue. Animal, a fish, being that has to do with the associations with the lake. And the crystal of jasper, something that's just grounding. And jasper is a very restful stone. I do like it. Let's see, and I have a feeling. Okay. It looks like on Rumble, I have got Mr. Marcus. Thank you very much for the compliment, sir. I do appreciate it. And you are so good about showing up to these things. All right. So next on the docket, we have Constitution Day, September 17th of next year. Now, the Constitution is the foundation of law in this country, and it's an enduring expression of American values. It's an echo of our cultural impetus and our philosophical foundation that actually led to the creation of this country to begin with. And I think our society needs a greater acquaintance with the Constitution, not less. And reading it, it reminds us of who we are and why we wanted things to be set up in a certain way and the boundaries that the powers that be, what they're supposed to adhere to. Now, it can be infuriating because when you compare what the Constitution says to what goes on, that can be maddening. But the madness that's going on in our political realm, it cannot go on for forever. And it's important that we acquaint ourselves with the Constitution, its basic framework, because that is the solid bedrock upon which we could rebuild society in its entirety if push really did come to shove. Now, for the deity, I chose Justitia, Roman goddess of justice, the mythical beings of the fates. Ancestors, I would say all of our American ancestors, but especially those who have fought for constitutional values, whether it was on the battlefield or in some society grounds. Land spirits, I would say all native land spirits. Traditions, I think we should establish the tradition of reading the Constitution or maybe the Federalist Papers, because the Federalist Papers were essentially what went out to the people to persuade them to ratify it. So getting better acquainted with why people thought it was a good idea and how it came about, I think that could be very helpful to us. Astrologically, the sun is in Virgo, mutable earth sign. Air for intellect, fire for ambition, water for respect, and earth for action. Colors again, red, white, and blue. Plants, I would say all seasonal flowers that are in that red, white, and blue, just whatever happens to be around us and is available. Animal of the eagle, and of course, crystals of ruby, diamond, and sapphire. Now let's look at Mabon, the autumn equinox, second harvest, which next year will be September 23rd. This is the height of the harvest season, at least in most places in the United States. It is a time of Thanksgiving. It's beginning of having more darkness than daylight hours. It's that polar opposite from Ostara. The seeds that were planted have now come to fruition. Thanks for the natural processes is coming to completion, and this will sustain life, and everything and everyone who makes that life possible is really deserving of our gratitude, and this is a good day to make that plain. For the deity, I chose Freyr, a Norse god of fertility and agriculture, mythical beings, brownies, ancestors, all of farmers, and all of us have farmers in our ancestry for sure. There's always going to be someone who will be kind of collecting their due in praise. And then for the land spirits, I would say any spirit that lingers around the fields and the pastures, particularly those inclined to be helpful. Traditions include bringing in the harvest, canning, other methods of preserving, deep cleaning the home, getting cozy for the coming winter, community harvest dinners, rituals honoring agricultural deities, and it's also the symbolic death of certain gods who then take up residence in the underworld until spring. This is the transition from Virgo to Libra, and it's the shift from mutable earth to cardinal air. So for the elements, I'm thinking air in the sense of cool winds, fire of stoves, hopefully hot stoves, water of cleansing, and earth having come to its full fruition. I chose colors of scarlet, of burnt orange, golden yellow, browns, and bronze. Plants, maples, chrysanthemums, and sage. Animals, I thought the wild goose would be good because we usually start seeing them stirring, at least where I live. And the crystal I chose was the yellow topaz. Now, before we get on to Columbus Day, let me check to see what's going on in chat. In Rumble, American Folklore said that he loves First Harvest. And then before that, Patty Parlor Games was saying grilling season is upon us and my hearth craves meat and fire. Right there with you, fellas. Right there with you. Okay, so caught up on comments. Now for Columbus Day. This occurs October 14th next year. It's a celebration of Christopher Columbus's journey to the Americas and the beginning of a new era. Now, his journey, even though it was his intention to reach India, and he never did, that journey nonetheless altered the course of history forever. The modern world, as we know about, has come about as a consequence of his voyage. So that in itself, just because of how significant and altering it was, I think that's worthy of making a note of. For deity, I chose Poseidon, Greek god of the sea, because, he had to traverse quite a bit of sea. Mythical beings, mermaids, because, again, the ocean. Ancestors who we could honor, sailors, anyone who we knew to be of a maritime profession. Land spirits, I would say all spirits that are tied to the ocean. Traditions include I would have to say they're particularly vibrant amongst Italian American communities. I think that's where you're most likely to see parades and have more of an emphasis on learning the history of the voyage and cultivating the spirit of an explorer. But that doesn't have to be confined to our Italian American brethren. I mean, what came about in the wake of his journey, I mean, that really does have significance for all of us. We might not be here. Some of us may never have been born. So, I mean, it is something to contemplate and worth celebrating. Astrologically, the sun is in Libra, a cardinal air sign. The elements, air, favorable winds, fire, that desire to discover, water for travels, and earth seeking land. Colors, I thought blues to represent the ocean, and browns representing wooden ships, and white for sails. I thought for a plant, seaweed, if you live along the coast, you might be able to actually get your hands on some of this. Animals, all sea life, and the crystal I chose was ocean jasper. And now, for one of the perennial favorites amongst pagans and witches in particular, we have Samhain, also called Winter Nights, Hell's Feast, or Halloween. I have to say, I am sorely tempted just to call it Halloween, just because that's common. And when you say, I'm doing this for Halloween, you don't have to explain it. And also, the pronunciation of Samhain is very controversial. And if I hear one more person say Samhain, I'm not sure I'll be responsible for my actions. So quite selfishly, I am leaning towards possibly calling it Halloween. But if you think I'm being silly, by all means, let me know. Or if you have another idea for what this could be called, just let me know in the comments. So this is, of course, a night of the dead, a time to remember and to honor ancestors. And because the veil is thinning, also to have a possibility of a visit from them. This is all about death being the shadow of life. It's an equal part of the natural process. And that, of course, merits due respect. For deities, I would suggest Hades and Persephone. They were the Greek, Hades, of course, is the Greek god of the underworld. He has charge of the dead. He's not the god of death. He's essentially the caretaker of the dead. And Persephone, of course, became his queen. And she's this interesting mingling of, the springtime and the decay of autumn. And she's a very fascinating goddess. They have the distinction of being really the only Greek deities that I have felt, I don't want to say connection because that would be overstating it, but feeling akin to. I feel like I get them. So that does make them very special because I definitely don't have that sense of feeling towards other Greek deities. But moving on, mythical beings, fairies, the unseelie court, according to legend, it is taking up its seat. Ancestors, all of our ancestors, and this would include also our spiritual ancestors. Land spirits, all spirits that guide the dead to the underworld. Traditions include all the fun stuff, carving the jack-o'-lanterns, having dumb suppers, divination, communicating with the dead, trick-or-treating, costume parties, watching spooky movies, bonfires, all kinds of stuff. All kinds of stuff. Astrologically, this takes place when the sun is in Scorpio, which is a fixed water sign. The elements, air is the ghostly breath. Fire is the candlelight, water for the haunted wells, and earth for cemeteries. You see, we can have fun with this. Who says that, we can't have fun with our spirituality, especially when we're trying to blend and merge our various traditions. Colors, black and orange are primarily traditional, but there's ways to work in any color, I think. You just have to be creative. The plant I chose was mugwort, animal bats, and crystals. I chose carnelian because that color, it really makes me think of the intensity of especially on the occasions if Halloween occurs on a full moon. Just there's something about that coloration that really does remind me of the carnelian crystal. So that's what I got there. Let's see. And now I think I better get a sip of water. Oh, and Marcus on Rebel, he was saying that the first harvest is really close to his birthday. I shall remember that, sir, and I shall do my best to make a fuss of you on the day. Okay, and alrighty, caught up there. So next on the docket, we have Veterans Day, which takes place November 11th. And this, of course, is for the purpose of honoring everyone who has served in the armed forces. And that would, of course, include current members. Now, without military successes, and the nation would have ceased to exist a very long time ago. So the sacrifices of people who have served or who are serving, that needs to be respected, because there have been occasions in our history when they had not done what the military is called upon to do, we simply would not be here. Deity, I chose Thor, Norse goddess storms, who also has the role of being the defender of Midgard. I feel, and tell me, and for those of you who are ex-military, if you feel any kind of kinship with him over that particular role, because that was my mindset when I chose him for this holiday. But if you think of someone else you think would be much more suitable to kind of take center stage, definitely let me know. Mythical beings, again, the Valkyries, ancestors, all ancestors in your family, all veterans in your family tree, and land spirits, all warrior spirits. Traditions include ceremonies honoring veterans and other expressions of gratitude, which probably are not plentiful enough. I do not think that our soldiers get the things that they are due. Astrologically, the sun is in Scorpio, a fixed water sign. Air, thinking of for the element of strategy, fire, having that fighting spirit, water, tears of sacrifice, and earth, actions. Colors I chose were red, white, and blue. The plant I chose was the red poppy. When before Veterans Day was Veterans Day, it was Armistice Day, and it was commemorating the end of World War I, and red poppies was a reference to the poppy fields of Europe, and so it was traditional to wear that, and I think that's something we could carry on. Animal, the wolf, and the crystal of the bloodstone. Now we come to Thanksgiving. Next year it will be November 28th. This is a celebration of the treaty between the Puritans and the Wampanoag people, and also of a successful harvest. Now, the peace between the Puritans and the Wampanoags lasted for 50 years, and let's face it, especially in that time period, 50 years of peace between such different groups is an eternity. I often compare it to, but what if the Israelis and the Palestinians were at peace for 50 years? Wouldn't that be something? I mean, no one would be poo-pooing that achievement. But more than that, because they were at peace for so long, and because we are celebrating, one of their big get-togethers, it's the shining moment of different peoples coming together to coexist peacefully and break bread. I think that's why it's such an important cultural celebration in America, and it brings families together, and the idea of gratitude and enjoying the fruits of hard work, that's a very common human virtue. So for the deity I chose was Demeter, the Greek god of fruitfulness, the mythical being of brownies. Ancestors, I would say, if we have any ancestors who did come from the Mayflower or the Wampanoag tribe, definitely this would be a day to show them some respect. But also farmers. anyone involved in any kind of farming, this would definitely be a day to show a little extra gratitude for the work that they put in. And the land spirits, I would say all spirits that are linked to the agricultural process. Traditions include gathering together as family groups for a banquet, expressions of thankfulness. Of course, we have that big parade, we have football games, and then the traditional turkey nap after dinner. All good stuff, all good stuff. And, and spiritually, we can also hold a ritual again for those agricultural deities and to honor, any farmers in our family lines. So for the astrological position, by this time in the year, the sun is in Sagittarius, which is a mutable fire sign. For the elements, air has turned to chilly breezes. With that fire, we're going back to the idea of the blazing hearth. Water has now become the frost, and the earth is definitely getting sleepy. For colors, I tend to lean towards, brown, a deep burnt orange, and golds. The plant of grain, animal of turkey, for obvious reasons, and the crystal of the brown jasper. Now, before I get into December and the last furlong, let me check to see what people are saying. Let's see. Patty's Parlor Games was talking about celebrating by serving your community on that day. That's in reference, I think, to Constitution Day or to Veterans Day, one of the two. American Folklore says that Halloween rocks. I agree, sir. And then Patty's Parlor Game says for Veterans Day, serve in a way that you can. I think that's a very good idea. Absolutely. We should be looking for opportunities to be of service. We should be active members of society. Let's see. Then here on YouTube, we have Ro. We've now well and truly passed the holidays. I've been pagan for so many of these. I'm learning how to do pagan instead of having opinions on how I did them pagan. You'll grow into it. You'll grow into it. It becomes second nature after a while. And hopefully this central brainstorming session will give you plenty of ideas. See, and then she went on to say that I do feel a kinship with Thor in a fellow veteran sort of way. I was hoping that would be the reaction. I didn't know for sure. I'm very much looking for feedback. I'm glad that at least in your case that my instincts did not lead me astray, and definitely other service members. Tell me what you think, because I can't read your mind. I can, and my instincts, they serve me decently well, but obviously I haven't lived in your shoes. So anything insights you have to share, greatly appreciated. Greatly appreciated. Okay. I think Marcus is referring to Thanksgiving when he said they actually ate deer. Well, yes, and I'm certainly not going to be opposed to anyone who serves venison on Thanksgiving. But, just for so many years, Thanksgiving being Turkey Day has been so traditional. It's one of those things I like the textures of it all coming together. We have lots of options to mark the occasion. So now, December. December seems to be with the tradition of the holiday season in America. That seems to be one of our last remaining actual cultural festivals, and so I have approached this in the spirit of common occasions actually being more of an ongoing festival. First, we have Mother's Night, December 20th. It's the night before the winter solstice, and it's the symbolic rebirth of the sun. Mother's Night, it's akin to that expectation and someone going through the process of childbirth and fighting through those dark hours until finally a child is produced. The return of the sun, and that sun starting to grow back in strength, that's the spark that returns life to the world once spring rolls around. So honoring all of the labors necessary to produce life, I think that gives us all the reasons we need to really celebrate this. For the deity, I chose Frigga, Norse goddess, the All-Mother, the Queen of Asgard, and of course her son Balder, Norse god of life and vitality, because the winter solstice in many circles is considered the date of his traditional birth. He born at the winter solstice. He's said to die at the summer solstice. Gosh, that reminds me a lot of the oak and the holly king. It reminds me also of the god Lu. I mean, there's a lot of mythological patterns. So even though I know not everyone sees it that way, that is definitely the way I see it, which is why I brought him up here. Mythical beings, I again brought in the Disir because those are spirit of female relatives assisting family and having a little bit of spiritual support for any mothers going through childbirth. I think that's very helpful to honor the ancestors, all the mothers in our family line, the land spirits of the sylphs. And traditions include some pagans do choose to stay up all night to greet the rising sun the next day, but it isn't always practical. Some people just make sure that they get up extra early the next day. But for those who actually do have the day off, staying up through that whole night, that's something they might choose to do. And of course, this is a good time to make offerings to mother goddesses. And of course, no, solar days would really be the next day. Anyway, astrologically, the sun is in Sagittarius, mutable fire. For the elements of air, think, the cold air, fire, again, with the hearth, water, the tears of labor, which I understand there are many, and earth, of course, is at sleep. Colors I suggested were white and blue. I'm thinking kind of darker colors. I'm thinking of the darkness of the night sky and the twinkling lights of the stars. The plant, the oak tree, because this, of course, begins the rebirth of the mythological oak king. Animals, the goose, because the goose is associated with Frigga, and the crystal, the diamond, because it is the toughest stone. And from what I understand from ladies who've given birth, you need a good amount of toughness while you are giving birth. And I will definitely be taking their word for it. Let's see. Oh, and Marcus says, really loving all this. I am so glad, sir. I'm glad you're enjoying this. Okay, caught up on the comments. So now for Yule, the winter solstice, December 21st. It is the shortest day of the year and also the rebirth of the sun. It is the low point and the spark of hope all in one. It is that return of the sun. It will grow in strength until life is returned. It's a time of hope, and it's a major turning point of the wheel. The deities I chose for this were the Oak King and the Holly King because they're making another transition. Mythical beings, fairies, relatives, I would say any relatives in your family line who inspired hope. Land spirits, I was thinking of the dwarves. Traditions include greeting the sun at dawn, whether you've been up all night before or whether you just got up early. I am more likely at this time of my life simply to set the alarm clock. But that's just me. If you're younger and you've got the energy, more power to you if you stay up the whole night. It's a good day for feasting. For rituals honoring solar deities, and of course also making offerings to the Kaliak of winter. Astrologically, it is the moment when Sagittarius turns to Capricorn, mutable fire shifting to cardinal earth. For the elements, air, winds of change, because things are starting to change. Fire, that break of dawn, water, snow, and earth again being at rest. The traditional colors incorporated are red and green. Plants, oak and holly for the obvious reasons. Animal of the deer. And I was also thinking because, especially in witchcraft circles, the idea of the deer, the king stag, this is also, linked in with Oak King, the Holly King, manifestations of, the great God of all. It's just one of those things psychologically that stuck in my head. So it made an appearance here. And for crystals, I was thinking ruby and emerald. And now we'll see if I get in trouble. We have Christmas Eve, December 24th. This is an occasion for observant Christians that, is the traditional celebration of the night before Christ's birth. Now, for pagans and other non-Christians, Christmas Eve is a cultural celebration for families and friends, and it's rich in a lot of lore, the whole idea of Santa Claus and whatnot. While many Christians will view anything to do with Christmas as being a strictly religious occasion, for so many years, it has absolutely become a cultural tradition that has meaning to people across many faiths and meaning for people who have no faith at all. The lore of Santa Claus, it's a beautiful parable about virtue and goodness and rewarding good behavior. And it also teaches the value of generosity and acknowledging when people are doing the right thing. For the deities, I chose Odin the All-Father because he is considered by many people to be a progenitor of Santa Claus. Not by everyone, that's controversial, but I'm kind of done with that conversation. Other people can debate amongst themselves. I'm fine with thinking of him in this way. But also we could think of Frau Halla, who was a Germanic goddess known to bestow gifts and who was known to come around during the Yuletide celebrations. I really do consider her to be kind of the psychological impulse behind the creation of Mrs. Claus. So, I like the pairing there. Mythical being, I was thinking of elves, ancestors. We could be honoring relatives who've passed who were really known for their kindness. And for the land spirits, I was thinking frost fairies. And traditions include good food and drink, singing, playing games, watching Christmas movies, fun stuff that isn't inherently religious one way or the other, which is why I think this really has become a celebration for everybody. Astrologically, the sun is in Capricorn, a cardinal earth sign. The elements, we have the winds of travel as Santa goes along on his sleigh. The fire, a toasty fireplace, water, snow, at least, one hopes they get snow. Certainly the children hope they get snow. And earth, again, is at rest. Again, the traditional colors are, red, green, gold. But I think any colors can take on a Christmassy feel if you just arrange it thoughtfully. For plants, evergreens, holly, mistletoe, traditional, obvious stuff. Animal, the reindeer, because how could it be anything else? And crystals, I was thinking of garnet and peridot. And now I want to check in on the comments to see if anyone's throwing stones at me. No one's throwing stones. Okay, we must be all right. We must be all right. Haven't irritated anybody just yet. All right, next we have Christmas Day, December 25th. For Christians, this is the birth of Christ. But for pagans and non-Christians, it's another day for family and certainly a day for relaxation, especially if they had a bigger celebration on Christmas Eve. And just as Christmas Eve has become cultural, family-oriented, and, so has Christmas become that. And participating in these kinds of proceedings, it creates it strengthens family ties. It's something that brings people together as opposed to, divvying them up into their own little separate groups. So that's kind of my impetus behind it. Deity of Saturn, and as kind of a nod to our more Hellenistic or Romanized pagans, because Saturnalia, kind of took place at this general time of year. Certainly, he was a god of karma. And this is also sort of a karmatic time, but it's karmatic in, a much more uplifting way than we generally think of karma. A mythical being, elves again, ancestors, all of our ancestors, because again, this has become very family oriented, as it should be. And land spirits, I was thinking any spirits linked with the idea of snow. Traditions involve waking up at the crack of dawn to open presents. Children are usually guilty of this, especially when their parents would vastly prefer, another hour or 2 or 3 of sleep before, having to be functional. Yet children will do as children do. And of course, tasty family dinners, relaxation. I think having, small mini ritual to honor family ties, I think that's something we could do. It wouldn't have to be formal or a big complicated deal, just something we might incorporate into our own traditions, if it makes sense for us to do it. Astrologically, the sun is in Capricorn, cardinal earth. The elements air, wind, fire, roaring fire, water, snow, earth at rest. The colors are red and green traditionally, but you can make anything fit if you really want to. Plants, evergreens, the animal of the cardinal. That's one of the birds that you commonly see in winter and is also a part of kind of the general Christmassy Yuletide motif. Crystals, I chose red jasper and green jasper, and I specifically picked on the jasper part just because of its calming, tranquil, relaxing vibes. And after the flurry of the holiday season, I think we need a little extra dose of that. So definitely charge your crystals. Now for the last on our calendar and the last day of the year, New Year's Eve, December 31st. It has the meaning of hope, renewal, and adventure. This is the end of our calendar year, the one that the whole of our society shares, and it is this liminal moment that is psychologically powerful for a lot of people. The deity I chose was Hecate, because one of the ways of connecting with her is by going to a crossroads where there are possibilities. And of course, this does mark a time when people are thinking in terms of possibilities. A mythical being, the phoenix, that idea of rebirth, the old year is dying, the new year is coming. And a lot of people try to make use of that transformative moment. Ancestors, anyone in your family tree who is kind of a mover and a shaker in some sense of the term. Land spirits, I was thinking any kind of spirit that gets fidgety during times of change. There's plenty of those. Traditions, having that countdown to midnight, watching the ball drop in Times Square, champagne, midnight kisses, parties, lots of fun stuff. Astrologically, this takes place in the sign of Capricorn, cardinal earth. And for the elements, air in the sense of the winds of change, fire, creativity and adventure, water, cleansing and renewal, and earth still at rest, because we're not quite going to attack the next year at full speed, but, things are starting to kind of move. Colors, white, silver, gold, and black. That's generally what I see in decorations. And I thought, close enough. I mean, that works for me. I don't really see the need to reinvent the wheel on that one. I was thinking of the ash tree and referencing of Yggdrasil, of things changing about on the world tree, animal of wolf, and crystal of quartz, because quartz is one of those crystals that it's good for everything. And so at a time of possibilities, I thought that was, kind of the direction to go. And that, my dears, is what I have in mind as a template for an American pagan calendar. So what do you think? I mean, there's a lot to consider with all of this, because there's a lot there. There's certainly a lot more occasions than what I was really counting on making mention of, for sure. And it took me a little while to get this presentation put together, because everything just got very long. And this is definitely the cliff notes, the bare bones, and just, kind of a starting point. We have these things that already exist. So can we link those things together? Can we integrate it in some way that makes sense for us? And I think that holidays are definitely a way of expressing a cultural identity, of things that are very specific to us as Americans. And since so many people are busy telling us, you don't have a culture, or you can't use these things because they mean something to us over here. Well, last I looked, the people who are bitching at us that way, they're not living on our soil, and they are not paying our bills, and are not living our lives or walking in our shoes. So I think we're kind of justified and making up our own minds about how we do this. And I see this, of course, as the beginning of a discussion. I have something much more extensive in mind once people have a time to kind of ruminate on this, share their insights. I want to make it to where people can kind of look at the cliff notes, look at these cheat sheets, and see, this is relevant to me. I can link into it through this way. It can actually have some power in my life, and I can bring my spirituality to all aspects of my life. It isn't confined to this little box, and I think it'd be healthy for us to take that step. And Ro very kindly says, bravo, I think it's great. I'm excited to go through the rest of the year with it. You and me both. I cannot believe we're already past the solstice. This year has absolutely been flying by. I'm already working on a lot of things for later in the year, just to try to get some routine work out of the way, so that as we get deeper into the year, it gives me more options to do more things, because the live streams are great. I love the interaction we get. I love the fact that live seem to get a lot more eyeballs than any kind of canned videos. And, that's useful, because those are people who were good enough to watch it, at least for a little while. They might be thinking about it, and then they can add their own contributions in their own way. And I do have a sense that the conversation and the thought process surrounding a lot of the issues I talk about on this channel, that it is spreading. At least I hope that it is. Let's see what's going on in Rumble. Marcus thinks it's great. I tell you what, I don't actually pay him, gang. I'm not even giving him brownies and cookies. He lives in a different state, so he is not being bribed to pop up in the comments and say nice things to me. This is all coming from a genuine place and his heart, and it's really nice. It's nice to get the feedback. It makes everything a lot easier. So that's pretty much what I have to say. We've already gone on for an hour and a half, because again, we have a lot more going on in the calendar year as far as celebration wise than what you might first think. So definitely give what I've had to say a think. If you want to look over the slides again, I have already posted them in the American Paganism and Witchcraft Project. Just go to the channel of American Celebrations. It'll be there. It's a PDF file. You'll have to download it, but it'll let you see things, and hopefully this is really the start, because again, I do think that holidays are a way for us to express and define our cultural identity, and I think we need that solid ground. And honestly, by knowing what holidays are important to us, I think that makes it easier for people to find their way into their own practice. At least that's my opinion. But definitely, I will let you guys go now. Anyone who wants to continue talking, just come visit me on Gilded. There's a link to join in the description box if you have not already. I really do appreciate you. I know this was a long one. And for anyone who might be coming in at the tail end, this, of course, is available for replay, whether you are watching on Rumble or Twitter or YouTube. So don't be bashful. Let me know what you think, and I will catch you guys very soon. Bye for now.